All right. Thank you, Stacy. I want to welcome everybody to the Indiana Department of Transportation's, um, Notice of Funding Opportunity Information Meeting, pre-bid meeting. As you may have seen in some of our communications, we are excited that you guys have decided to join us, and we really appreciate you spending a little bit of your afternoon with us this afternoon. A couple of housekeeping items before we dive in. This webinar will be recorded. The recording and PDF slide deck will be posted to the INDOT NEVI webpage within a few days, so keep a lookout there. And then we can also send out a notification email once the materials are available, so that everyone's aware. You don't have to keep tabs. Just a note that everybody is muted, all participants. Please keep chat open, your chat windows open for both questions and poll questions as well. Questions should be typed into the chat. Our INDOT team will be entering answers to short questions throughout the webinar, and longer, more complex responses will be handled at the end with our team. There will be 2 poll questions for participants to respond to. I will queue them up verbally, or my partner will queue them up, but they will appear in the chat. So please keep an eye on the chat for that. Without further ado, I will do a quick introduction. My name is Nathan Sturdivant. I am the Connected and Automated Vehicle Director for the Indiana Department of Transportation. And with me today as a speaker is Diane Newton. She is our Program Manager for HNTV. Diane and her team have done a fantastic job helping INDOT really bring this thing along to the point where we are today. So we're really excited to bring this information to you today. And additionally, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that we've got our entire team that's been instrumental in the NOFO development here for question and answers at the end, as well as throughout the presentation. So with that, we'll do a quick look at the agenda. We'll start with a little bit of NEVI background for those of you who aren't aware. The program overview and key requirements, as well as Indiana's implementation plan. We'll go through procurement goals and approach. We'll touch lightly on the NOFO schedule and logistics. I will hand it over to Diane to really give us the meat and bones of the NOFO and the expectations for primes and vendors as it comes to the notice funding opportunity application. She'll also go through the award and contracting, what that'll look like, and then we'll wrap up with some next steps, and then we'll really open it up to everybody on the call for hopefully a robust Q&A session. All right, we'll dive in quickly to the NEVI background.
Can you come to Tommy's office?
Apologize. All right, so the NEVI program was created as a part of the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law. The goal for the program is to create a nationwide network of 500,000 DC fast chargers by 2030. There's a formula for funding in which Indiana will receive roughly $100 million of the allocated funds for the program, of which I believe nationwide we're looking at about $7.5 billion. But as I said, Indiana's share is just a little under 100 million, but we're excited. We believe that is going to really help create a robust EV charging infrastructure. The intent of the program is to prioritize funding along the what we call the AFCs, the alternate fuel corridors, which is by and large our state's interstate highway system. There are a few key U.S. routes, US 31, and we've got a couple others that are in the pipeline as potential future AFCs. And the critical piece here is that we have to have a DC fast charger every 50 miles along these corridors, and the chargers have to be within 1 mile of those corridors. So we really want to eliminate what you call a charging desert. areas. So you go out west and you get the signs that say last fueling station, 500 miles, fuel up here. The intent is really to provide that gap in infrastructure to close that gap. Rest areas are not eligible. State-owned property. But we are allowed to contract with private entities for installation, operation, and maintenance, which is the intent of the grant funding as we currently have it constituted. All right. INDOT's implementation approach, we are not going to own or operate. So the intent is that prime proposers will be responsible for long-term ownership and maintenance. There will be an oversight and administrative component that is a part of the NEVI program where we will be responsible for ensuring specific metrics and goals, some uptime and making sure that these sites continue to operate for a period of 5 years. We are utilizing a competitive procurement. There will be so the intent is that it's a clear, competitive, replicable process. Excuse me. And one of the key components that Indiana is focusing on is that we are prioritizing sites that are ready now. We want to make sure the infrastructure is there, that we aren't potentially waiting, long term for development. We want to see charging infrastructure. With Crossroads of America, the intent of this program is to really build out that infrastructure. And the funding formula for the program is that it will be an 80-20 split. 80% coming from the NEVI grant, 20% will be from the applicant. Here's a quick look at the candidate sites along all of the alternate fuel corridors across the state of Indiana. We currently have 86 candidate sites. Most of which this has been largely informed by several rounds of public engagement. We did add 6 new sites and 2 were adjusted based on public feedback. So we've really prioritized going out, working with the community, public feedback, and trying to identify appropriate locations. These candidates represent that goal of providing that 50-mile maximum gap and providing what we believe is appropriate infrastructure locations for these EV chargers. Again, another look at the public comments for the site. The vast majority of the sites remained unchanged from our original NEVI plan that was published last year. However, as a part of a pretty robust public engagement effort over the last 3 months or so, trips were taken all over the state to get feedback from communities, from stakeholders, utilities, as well as potentially applicants on what makes the most sense. And as you can see, several, I think, what we have 6 that were added and 2 that were tweaked. And those are listed over on the left side of the screen. Again, this will be provided. So if you have any questions on potential relocations, you can refer back to the slide deck that will be passed out. All right, procurement goals. The intent here is that we are looking for turnkey deployment. So turnkey, we want teams that can compete on all aspects of the project. The goal is to balance turnkey and as many stations as possible with quality. We want to ensure reliability, equity, and sustainability. We really want to see a quality approach. So I mentioned that there's a balance to stretching the dollar, but at the end of the day, we want to see quality. We want to see stations that are up and available for Hoosiers and all those who are utilizing the Crossroads of America. So we are looking for long-term investment here, things that will continue to operate well now and into the future. All right, quick look at Indiana's formula funding. As I stated at the outset, Indiana's got about $100 million to allocate for this notice of funding opportunity. 86 candidate sites, 44 are what are required to be built out to meet those gaps along the current alternate fuel corridors. And as routes are added, that number can go up. With this specific round, I want to point out that we will be looking at fiscal years 22, 23, and 24 for funding. So we've got, I want to say it's about about $57 million of funding for round one. There will be potential follow-up procurements for fiscal 25 and fiscal 26, I believe. What we want to evaluate is after this round of sites are selected, what the current infrastructure looks like, where those gaps are, and we can prioritize those sites. But there will be additional funding. So I want to make sure it's clear that if you are not selected in round one, there will be additional monies available in future years, future rounds. We are hoping to have an absolutely robust round one, but we do anticipate having some follow-ups as well. All right. We want to ensure that primes and subs, because this is a little bit of a unique program, particularly for the Department of Transportation, that we're connecting primes and subs on this project, as this is something that falls a little bit outside of what how INDOT normally does business. And so on our interactive map on our website, there is the ability to register as a vendor at specific sites. So you can go in, you can click on a specific site location, and you can add your contact information as site specific, or if you'd like to across the network. But that you are available as a vendor, prime, looking at specific locations. So this is an opportunity to really take a peek at this when you're going in and trying to get your information out there. When you click on one of the pins, a survey form will pop up and ask for information about the type of stakeholder. Phone number, company name's optional. Users can indicate interest and opt in to share their information. Our team, led by Carrie and the Greater Indiana Clean Communities nonprofit, will use this information to facilitate a vendor registry and assist EVSE vendors, site hosts, and utilities, and anyone else interested in connecting before deployment. So we're pretty excited about that. And if you could pop to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, a quick look at the NOFO schedule and logistics as it currently sits. All right, we currently sit at the pre-bid webinar, and if you've taken a peek at the NOFO, this information is on there. And if you haven't, you can certainly grab all of this. It should be reflected as shown here. As I said, we're at 9:12. We're at the pre-bid webinar. A week from today, questions are due. Responses to questions will come out a week following that. We will have an XBE networking event on 9/29, which will be an opportunity for XBEs and primes to connect, to network in a virtual setting. We're pretty excited about that. There are points available in the notice funding opportunity for XBE interaction. So this is an opportunity to gather that information. One thing to note is that applications are due 11/22, and that was a response. We actually increased the application period from 42 to 83 days after talking with other states, as well as some feedback we wanted to provide as much time as we thought was reasonable to get solid applications in on candidate sites. So applications will be due at the end of November, and we anticipate making selections in early 2024. The hope is in January. But that will largely depend on the volume. So if we get a good, robust response to this, as well as the rest of the process, we are committed to early 2024. But that's why we've kind of left it as not a hard and fast date yet. All right, submission logistics. So we've got an online portal that is a public page. It's a SharePoint-based page. Primes can request access for this. We encourage you to do so sooner rather than later. We do need to receive those requests by November 1st of 2023. That is a hard cutoff. And each prime will have a private page that they may submit their information as well as questions and answers. It is a SharePoint-based page. You can send questions, or excuse me, you can send a request for access to the portal by sending an email to nevi@indot.in.gov, and we will set you up with an account. We'll get you credentials and everything set up, and you'll be ready to go from that aspect. But I do want to stress that you get those in to us as soon as you can. We have to get that set up on, kind of back of house. It takes a little bit of time, but we absolutely want to get you included on the portal. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Diane to give us kind of the meat and bones of the NOFO.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Nathan. And before I get started, I did want to introduce the first poll question. To get a sense of our audience today, we wanted to have you each select which category best describes your organization, and then we'll have a follow-up poll question later on to help facilitate that teaming and XPE vendor engagement event that we're going to have at the end of the month. So what I'm going to do is walk through the notice of funding opportunity. And as many of you are aware, we did release a draft RFP. It was an RFP at the time in early June, and we had that open for public comment until June 18th. So we received an initial set of comments, about 40 or so comments in June. And then in the process of our public engagement in July, we've gotten about 100 comments total from 37 different stakeholders. So the breakdown by stakeholder type of who has provided comments and input into the notice of funding opportunity is shown in the pie chart on the right. See, overwhelmingly it was EVSE operators, but also a fair amount from the general public. In terms of the topics for the comments, most related to the locations for the candidate sites and the scoring rubric itself. The third highest category, though, was on the topic of equity, workforce development, and education and awareness. So these are the three areas that have changed the most between the draft RFP and the final notice of funding opportunity. Nathan already discussed the additional candidate charging stations that we've added. I'm going to try to highlight the differences that we've made and the updates to the scoring rubric, and also touch on the additional indicators for equity, workforce development, and education. The proposal format is unchanged from what was shown in the draft RFP. Applicants still will submit 3 parts through the SharePoint site that Nathan described earlier. Parts A and B are submitted once per team, and they are the same for each team. Part C is the site proposal, and that must be submitted for each site that is being applied for. So the next several slides will provide details over on each part. And we do, in one of our appendices, Appendix D, we have a template for each of these individual parts. So Part A is a pass-fail section that includes our application checklist, the compliance matrix for the minimum NEVI program requirements, which are also contained in Appendix C. And most notable, this is one of the bigger changes that we made between draft and final, was the switch from INDOT pre-qualification to what we're calling a proof of financial viability. And I have more on that in just a couple of slides. Part A is limited to 3 pages, not including the compliance matrix. Part B is limited to 5 pages for the team. That is intended for applicants to discuss their experience both in Indiana and the Midwest, their qualifications and specific projects, their technical approach overall, not a site-specific technical approach, but more a NEVI technical approach in general, and cost information, which will describe things like the amount of cost share provided and the source of that cost share. And the final part, Part C, is limited to 4 pages per site, and it's inclusive of all the categories that are listed on this slide. I'll dive into the details on that in just a minute. One thing to note is that there is the ability for applicants to go above and beyond minimum requirements for NEVI, but once those items are written into a proposer's application, if you are selected, those items will be added to the draft contract and considered commitments. So I mentioned that the proof of financial viability has replaced the pre-qualification requirement. To demonstrate financial viability, we really wanted to think about and ensure that the teams that we were selecting for the projects were going to be committed to the life cycle of the project. So the installation, construction, as well as the 5 years of O&M. And so INDOT is requesting teams demonstrate any existing bonds, or if there are no existing performance payment or maintenance bonds existing, the team has to demonstrate their ability to secure these bonds, and the amount of the bonds is dependent on the number of project sites being applied for. So the total amount should equal the estimated project size. The bond requirements are just a demonstration of what is possible. If you are selected, then the bond requirements will be finalized as part of the draft contracting process. So with the goal of receiving applications for turnkey projects, as Nathan mentioned, we wanted to have this slide which summarizes the wide variety of potential team partners and roles and responsibilities that may be represented on a team. There may be one company that fulfills multiple roles and responsibilities, but we just wanted to show the universe of possibility, especially for the sense that we want to connect primes with potential subs, with potential local subs or disadvantaged businesses. And so we wanted to think outside the box and encourage all potential primes to also think outside the box. So, these may be subcontractors, especially who may be more engaged at the local level with regard to the on-site amenities, or, for example, a team's approach to outreach, engagement, and workforce development at the local site-specific level. So our goal is for potential primes and subs to create teams that combine best practices within the regional and national EVSE market with a more diverse set of subcontractors to aid in expanding the EVSE knowledge here in Indiana. So to facilitate that networking, we also have our follow-up poll question is asking about what type of project partners you may be most interested in connecting with. And the results of this poll will help us create better matches at our event that we're holding at the end of September. Okay. So with regard to the format of Part B, as I mentioned, is submitted once per proposer. I mentioned it is limited to 5 pages and is intended to summarize the team's experience, qualifications, and approach to operations. And that applies regardless of the site-specific location. So limited cost information, as I mentioned, is also required. That is the percent of cost share offered and a brief description of the EVSE ownership model, because we know those can vary from vendor to vendor. The proposers also have the option to provide a short narrative within that 5 pages on the proposer's relative experience. And it's optional but not required that references are provided. At least 3 are preferred to demonstrate the necessary amount of experience. And we do hope that each applicant does describe all of their team members and their roles and responsibilities. We ask applicants to highlight any key staff and indicate their commitment to the project for the full 5+ years that it will take to complete it. In terms of the technical approach, this is a narrative section, and we are asking applicants to describe each of these elements briefly, as well as including a proposed schedule highlighting these major activities for a typical installation. And you kind of notice that physical security is added in blue. On the next couple slides, anything in blue is a relatively new requirement or a change from the draft RFP to the final. So in addition, we had cybersecurity previously listed. We've now added an applicant's approach to physical security at the site as well. And for the cost information, I think I've covered this a couple times, but one thing we're not asking for, we're not requesting an estimated per site or total cost. The goal here is to just get an understanding of that cost share capability within the applicant. With Part C, what I've done here is I've given the number of points that are available for each part of the site proposal. And anything in blue, as I mentioned, is an update from the draft. The goal for Part C is to provide that site-specific proposal, including the site information, specifically any design and amenities that go above and beyond the minimum NEVI requirements. The second part, we are also requesting a one-page site schematic so we understand the location of the EVSE, where the point of sale equipment is, the amenities, and the ADA layout. The site information, the site readiness, that is a series of 8 multiple choice questions. There is an opportunity for additional narrative comments to support the multiple choice selections. The same goes for future proofing. That was a change. I think future proofing previously just had the multiple choice questions. We've now added the narrative component so that applicants have that flexibility to describe their innovation or scalability within their site approach. And then equity, we've expanded it. As I mentioned, it was previously 4 questions. It's now 5. And we made it more quantitative for some of those questions. And actually, because that was a bigger change, I'm going to walk through those in more detail. So I think the one that we added was the second criteria. It's titled engagement with XBEs during application. We expanded this significantly, and we initially had, I think, just DBEs listed. We're now using the term XBEs because we're not limiting it to just INDOT disadvantaged business enterprises. We're opening it up significantly, and we've also added that formal networking event on September 29th. There'll be a slide at the very end that has registration information about that event, and we'll also be sending out notification and registration information through our INDOT NEVI mailing lists. But that really gives people really no excuse for not trying to connect with potential subs in Indiana. So we had several in-person events in July, but this will be a large virtual event. It'll be open for 3 hours, so it really is not that big of an effort to join for some or all of that meeting, which will be on the morning of September 29th. The other thing we did was we kind of added the scoring criteria. We had included already certifications with INDOT, Indiana Department of Administration, city, county, municipal governments within the state. But what we also thought about, we got feedback on as we did some engagement this summer, was that we should also consider and allow private third-party certifications and other federal certifications, including the Mid-States Minority Supplier Diversity Council and the U.S. Small Business Administration's Hub Zone program. So we've really opened it up and are trying to think outside the box in terms of what businesses may be eligible, which businesses primes can partner with in order to maximize the 10 points that they have available here. So this slide summarizes our scoring rubric. We do have a very detailed rubric in Appendix E. Stephanie may tape it into the chat. I always misremember my appendix numbers, but this is the high-level summary of the rubric. You can see Part A is pass-fail, Part B is a total possible 250 points, and Part C is a total possible 250 points. But then within the subcategories, you see how those points are allotted, and hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to maximize the points in your application. One other item we added going from draft to final, we were just thinking about our review team at INDOT trying to sort through potentially hundreds of proposals. And so we added a file naming convention to assist the scorers who will be evaluating potentially multiple applications. So Part A and B are pretty straightforward. We'll have the prime applicant's company name, the INDOT NEVI NOFO, and then Part A or B. Part C, we're also asking applicants to tack on the AFC number. So in this example, this is I-65 and the exit number that the site proposal corresponds to. The appendices, I knew I had a slide coming up on appendices. So we have a handful of appendices. We had A through G in our draft. We've added a new one, Appendix B. I'll have a slide on that in just a second. Appendix A is reference only. We know a lot of people may not have seen the interactive map. So the first appendix is a detailed spreadsheet of all the candidate site locations as well as the map. We've added Appendix B. We recognize and heard a lot of feedback that some sites may be outside that 1 mile driving distance polygon. So for those applications, we are asking applicants to include a draft of the discretionary exception request template with their draft proposal. That would not be counted toward the page limit, but it is an FHWA requirement. And so we're trying to think ahead of potential sites that may need that. Appendix C is unchanged. It's the minimum NEVI requirements. Appendix D, as I mentioned, is the template that has a template for each of the parts. E is a checklist mainly for applicants' benefits to ensure that they're finishing and checking off all of the required elements. And then Appendix F, I know there's been some questions in the chat about the detailed rubric. So unlike the simplified version I showed earlier, Appendix F contains examples. So you really understand how if there's 20 points available, what will get you 5 points versus what will get you 20 points. The goal here is for INDOT to be as transparent as possible with regards to the scoring. Appendix G, the utility form and contact information should be submitted with Part C, but it does not count towards the Part C page limit. And Appendix H has been updated from draft to final. We've had the benefit of starting some engagement with the INDOT legal office. We're going to be continuing to build up our draft contract. So this is really just an outline at this point, but this will be something that INDOT continues to work on. While you guys are working on your applications, we will be working on the draft contract terms and conditions. So I mentioned the discretionary exception appendix being new, and this slide provides a little bit more detail on the reasons for those exceptions that may be included in the site proposals. Because, as I mentioned, these have to be approved by FHWA. We're asking applicants to really jumpstart this process by submitting a draft that we can then vet and start the process as soon as possible after selection. So award and contracting. I don't think we made any changes between draft, RFP, and final NOFO, but I'll walk through everything again one more time. The initial selection, as I mentioned, Part A is a pass-fail. We're really just checking adherence to the NOFO guidelines and that all of the required elements have been submitted. And then there will be a technical evaluation for parts B and C where we're scoring the points, seeing how many points out of those 250 are received by each site. The final selection really completes that mapping of qualified bidders to the number of sites required for AFC build out. This is a sort of a geographic exercise on the part of the INDOT team. We will be doing that as part of the final selection process. And we'll also then, once we make initial selections based on scores, we will be working with the selected applicants to create that final number and location of the sites, a work plan, which would include an estimated project schedule and cost. And once there is agreement on these items between INDOT and the selected applicant, a contingent award and initial purchase order and notice to proceed will be provided. The award process will be two-phase, but there will only be one contract. So each box on this slide corresponds to a purchase order and a notice to proceed. The milestones that have to be met to receive authorization and therefore your next purchase order and NTP are in the box, in each box. So for example, to move from phase 1 to phase 2, we have to have finalized the site host agreement, the site design, have an estimated project cost that both INDOT and the applicant agree to, and demonstration of those bonding requirements, which I mentioned. For the second phase, the sites will complete NEPA, which the INDOT team will be leading, lease agreements if necessary, site permits and utility coordination must be complete. And given all of these above items, then we are expecting the teams to provide that final project cost. The third milestones is around the completion of site commissioning, construction, and installation, verifying that all the equipment is operational and working according to the NEVI requirements. And then throughout phase 4, which is the O&M phase, there will be the monthly, quarterly, and annual reporting per the NEVI requirements, as well as a performance audit that takes place around the halfway point of the O&M period. So as I mentioned, the awardee will have one contract that handles all phases and activities of the project, from pre-construction and design through construction and post-construction, all the way through to operations and maintenance. The contract will outline requirements for authorization to move to the next phase and also identify clauses allowing termination during the various phases. For applicants that are not selected, they will receive a notice of non-selection as well as their scores. The contingent award, executed contract, and notice to proceed will enable the selected team to compile their project details and specifics for each site, which will include the final number of sites, the final site schematic, the estimated project cost, and the final site host agreement. A final award, as I mentioned, will not be provided until the site has NEPA approval, site permits are completed, and utility coordination and cost estimating are completed. So what this site does was sort of break down the distribution of tasks and activities. Majority of these are on the awardee side, but you do see that NEPA box, the third box down, that will be an INDOT responsibility for navigating the NEPA process and securing those exceptions. Upon approval of all these items, this is sort of what it takes to move on to the phase 3 of the contract. And this is just a summary of those milestones. This is also in the notice of funding opportunity. One thing we did change, one of the comments we got previously when the draft was out, was that the phase 1 percentages were a little bit low. We didn't bump them up by much, but we did increase the payment amount associated with completion of that pre-construction phase. It was previously 5 and 5, 5% for the high level cost estimate and 5% for the final site host agreement and purchase order for the equipment. We bumped that second item up to 10%. And we did also add a notation within the NOFO that project teams will not receive advance payment or funding for the projects, but this outlines the reimbursement process. And so this table, the reimbursement process will align with the phases and milestones in this table that we've shown on this slide here. All right, and with that, I think I'll turn it back to Nathan to wrap up and talk about next steps.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Diane. I really appreciate it. As we mentioned kind of at the outset, the next big event that next step is the INDOT NEVI XBE networking event. This will be September 29th from 9 a.m. to noon. Please email the NEVI inbox to ensure that you got the latest news on NEVI related events. The registration link is below. This event and the registration will be distributed to all of the primes. It will also be sent out through the INDOT, NEVI, and EIS mailing lists, as well as other channels. If you have any questions, you want to receive this information, please let us know. We are happy to distribute this. We want to see robust participation in this event. This is a great opportunity to provide primes and XBEs the opportunity to connect in a quick one-on-one, call it kind of a speed dating setup where they'll be able to meet one-on-one with primes, kind of give their pitch in a short speed dating type of setup and then move on. So you should be able to hit multiple vendors and or primes throughout this morning. So it's a really good opportunity. And as I stated earlier, this is an opportunity to receive points. This would qualify as one of the XBE networking events in the scoring rubric. All right, next steps on INDOT and the applicant side. So I kind of went through what INDOT's looking at for the future. We've got the question responses coming out on our end in just over 2 weeks. And taking a step back, a week from now, questions are due for the applicants. So mark that 9/19 on your calendar. If you've got questions as you're going through the NOFO, make sure you get them to us by 9/19, please. We want to make sure that we provide answers to any questions that you've got. We want to see this succeed as much as possible. We will have answers out on 9/26. Those will be made available on that portal. And then just a few days after questions, we've got the XBE networking event that we just talked about. Between the XBE networking event on 9/29, we've got a little over, well, just about 2 months, I suppose, for the applicants to really run through and develop their proposals. You know, running out to the candidate sites, making sure that there's viability, talking with your utilities, your stakeholders, and your partners. And then we want to make sure that those applications are submitted by 11/22. So that's the big star on the calendar. We intend to score over the holidays and hopefully have contract terms and conditions as well as selections made in early 2024. As I stated, the goal is January. And then we are already thinking through the NEPA process, and we want to have that ready so that we're ready to roll by the notice to proceed. And then kind of taking a step back, taking a quick look at kind of the overall long-term timeline for round one, these selections. We're kind of sitting in that 23-24 procurement and contracting phase right now. We very much anticipate that in 2024, we'd really like to see charging stations in the ground by June of 2025. Sooner the better. But for phase one, that's really what we would like to see. As we've talked with the Joint Office and Federal Highway, that is kind of a target date that we've set up. The second procurement will likely, again, if necessary, be coming out sometime next year. And then once the chargers are in the ground from that 25 to 27 window, we will be building out the AFCs, looking at operation and maintenance, and then the reporting for that 5-year O&M commitment. So that may run, depending on round one, round two, we could be out beyond 2027 to kind of the long-term completion of the NEVI program. And with that, that's all we got for you today. We very much appreciate you guys taking time this afternoon. I know on behalf of Diane, myself, and the rest of the team, we just want to say thank you. We appreciate your time, and we want to open it up for any questions that have come in and or will be staged at this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. I can go over some of the questions that we've seen in the chat. We have a couple questions about where folks can rewatch this video and have access to the slides.
Yeah, so the intent will be that this is being recorded, and we will add this to the NEVI webpage, which is listed right at the bottom of this last slide here. If you search in Google INDOT NEVI, you will find this webpage, but it is on INDOT's the in.gov/INDOT webpage. It's a little bit buried when you look at the web address there, but that's my simple direction. Is if you do that, you'll get to our webpage, and from there you'll be able to locate it. It should be pretty simple.
And I think, Stacy, can we also we can push a message out if you have subscribed for updates on the program. We can also push a message out when the recording and the slide deck is up. It shouldn't take more than a few days, but we can push out a message that it's available.
Yeah, correct. Our next question is about the candidate sites and whether the owner operator must own the land already.
I can take that question if you want, Nathan. I mean, yes, but it's not a necessity. That's going back to the slide that had all the different site roles and responsibilities. We recognize that there may be instances where it's an EVSE provider and they have partnered with an existing business, an existing location, which is why the rubric and the template reflect that site host agreement and the readiness and maturity of the site host agreement. So it's not a requirement, but we would expect that the site host, the property where the charging station is located, is a member of the team or has provided a site host agreement or input to a site host agreement.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is about whether or not we can confirm that the question in the application about the number of clients or customers served, if that includes the electric vehicle SE manufacturer network, maintenance provider, customer numbers.
Oh, wait, now I'm going to scroll up. I think I need to read that question.
Can INDOT confirm the question in the application about the number of clients and customers served and whether that includes the EVSE manufacturer network, maintenance provider, customer numbers?
I believe that question is about the rubric within the scoring rubric and the experience section, part B. Okay.
Yes, we got a thumbs up.
Stephanie, would you mind pulling up the rubric? I'm sorry, I don't have the detailed rubric pulled up in front of me. I only have the simplified one, but I will go back to at least that slide. Bear with me. I think it really was just a demonstration of if it falls into the experience, the past EVSE projects. Is that where the question is relating to, Tina? If you give me the thumbs up again. Okay. Yeah, I believe that that really just is dependent and reflective of the more customers that sort of are reflected, the higher the number of points for those 75.
Okay, great. We also received a question about how to sign up for notifications, and I have dropped that link in the chat so everyone will have that available to them. The other question is, when company information is sent for portal access, when should they anticipate to receive credentials for the portal access? And if credentials were not received, how do they reach out for assistance?
Good question. So you should receive the credentials within a couple of days. For people that had already provided us with their contact information, those credentials were sent out. So email the NEVI at indot.in.gov address if it was like in the previous round, like if we initially requested credentials or login credentials in June, July. So if you have already requested them and haven't received them yet, email that address and we'll look into it. We also have, if you have portal access, but maybe can't get in, there is like a contact email address within the portal itself that's sort of a help email. And so we have that way to sort of troubleshoot any issues with getting access if you do receive your credentials, but for some reason they're not working.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, which fiscal year allocations will be used on this procurement round?
Yeah, so this procurement round will be fiscal years 22, 23, and as soon as we're waiting on final approval of our current NEVI plan, but we anticipate that to come shortly, and fiscal 24 will be included as well, which again will total up to about $57 million.
Great, thank you. Next question, are you considering alternative options other than grid-connected power for the charging stations?
I can take a stab at that question. And obviously, that is the priority. But within the future proofing section of Part C, there is an opportunity for applicants to describe innovations. We sort of do include things like battery backup or solar power, other alternatives to grid supplied energy. So there is the ability for applicants to maximize their points if they do have a solution that includes sort of non-traditional power generation sources. Those can be described in the future proofing section.
Okay, great. And we have a timeline question. What is the deployment timing from award to being able to construct?
I can answer that question, Nathan. I don't want to jump in and answer them all, but yeah, it really is not limited. I mean, that was one of the reasons we're asking, at least for a high level schedule. We understand that there are delays and challenges right now with the supply chain, but really what the long pole in the tent is that NEPA process. So we're ideally going to start that as soon as sites receive their notice to proceed, and we're shooting for a 60-day window to gain the exceptions that are required. And then from there, it really is dependent on as quickly as an applicant wants to move. We're planning, had heard of 18 to 24 month lead times for transformers, if that's necessary, 12 to 18 months, maybe longer for some of the EVSEs, which is how we came up with this timeline on this slide. Was really just thinking, that sites may need a year and a half to get stations in the ground. But really, there's nothing to prohibit teams from moving faster if they're able to, if they already have equipment perhaps in a warehouse and can move quicker, or if they're upgrading an existing site that may already have 2 charging ports and they're adding an additional 2 to make the station NEVI compliant. We would be really excited for stations that could move quicker.
Okay, next question. What subcontractors will be needed in operations and maintenance?
I mean, we wanted to think outside the box. If I go back to my slide, we were thinking about everything from, landscaping and snow removal to maintenance of the EVSEs themselves, maintenance of any of the on-site amenities that may be added. We recognize there may be instances where equipment is damaged. So we're trying to not limit it too much in terms of what subcontractors may be able to support a team on the O&M side.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, what will be the role between the applicant and NDOT during NEPA? Will there be deliverables required by the applicant during this time prior to contract?
We're working, as Nathan mentioned, we are working on outlining the NEPA process and how it will go. Our goal is to really maximize information from the applications to get the NEPA process started. I do imagine we'll have some type of deliverable written into the contract, but I don't think it would be full documentation. It may be just making sure the team is available to support inputs and questions and answers that we're going to need to prepare those exceptions and the documentation that we have to for each site. So I would say it would be written as an activity that the applicants would have to support during the project.
Okay, next question. How many sites for the first phase in fiscal year 22-23?
So we don't have a predefined number of sites. We need 44 to hit full deployment. However, we're really going to look at what that funding level supports, as well as estimated costs, and build out from there. So we do not have a predetermined prescribed number of sites that we anticipate. We're really looking to see what comes in with these applications, and then evaluate the corridors and the network from there.
Great, thank you. I think we probably have time for one more question, and it just came in. When will the equity, workforce, and development start after award?
I mean, I think that this is an activity that really spans both the project planning as well as implementation. So I don't think, whatever activities an applicant wants to highlight, if there is community engagement that they want to do to finalize the actual site, if there's groups they want to bring in and make a part of their project team, we're really not limiting it when those activities could start. We recognize that engagement should be a consistent approach of the project from start to finish.
Well, since we have 1 more minute left, I think we might be able to get one more question squeezed in. We have someone who is curious if the during the awarding process, if the reviewers will be reviewing the submissions via writing or electronically.
They will be reviewing them electronically. So what happens in the portal, there is separate access for the reviewers, and there are terms of use that reviewers have to sign. Even though they do work for INDOT and this is an INDOT portal, those reviewers still have to sign a terms of use, which provides all those sort of security and privacy questions that they won't be reviewing the documents on their laptop in a public place. That's an example of one of the items in that set of terms and conditions. So all of the review and scoring also takes place through the portal. The scores have a separate interface from the applicants, but it is all through that same SharePoint portal.
All right, thank you. We have a couple more questions that we can, and they're continuing to file in, so we can look at how we can respond to these questions following the webinar, but we do appreciate everyone's active engagement today.
And I know one thing we will do, Stacy, right, is we will have a transcript of all the questions and answers that were asked today. So we'll get that posted as well. We already mentioned the recording and the slides, but then we'll also have a transcription of all the Q&A. So even though we were answering questions verbally, we'll make sure to get responses typed up so that there's the written log of all the questions, not just the ones that were answered in the chat.
All right, we thank you everyone for attending today and taking time out of your busy schedules. And we will, like we mentioned, we will follow up with everyone and make sure you have access to the materials as soon as they are available.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for attending.